So if you work in enterprise security, then you know the key questions are like, who can access my data? Who's got access under what conditions? And this includes things like cloud. So if you're interested in these topics, stick around. I've got a really interesting guest today, someone who's an expert in this area, runs a company that specializes in this area. We're going to ask him some questions about how you can improve your access control, and in particular, things like payback and authorization. You're going to enjoy it. So stick around. I think you'll enjoy the discussion today. Hi, this is Ed Amoroso from TAG. It's wonderful to see you. Welcome to our discussion today. I have Oren Harel, who's one of the experts in authorization and identity and access management. He's an entrepreneur who's been running a wonderful company called PlainID that works in the area of payback and a lot of new things. Oren's going to take you through some of that. I can't wait for our discussion here. But Oren, thanks for making time. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks, Ed, and thanks for taking the time and having this interview with me. It's exciting.
That's great. Hey, for people who might be less familiar with the company, even though a lot of folks in our community know what you guys do, but why don't you give a brief summary and then we can get into some of the technology.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So we'll start with a little bit about PlainID, right? So the place we are actually playing is the identity security posture management, and what that means, right? So a lot of our enterprise customers that we are working with, right? They're eventually what they're trying to achieve is the full security around what their identity can do. So starting with some kind of discovery, identity visibility. So any activity that those identity are doing inside the organization and during the identity journey, and then having the ability to start managing which kind of application they're accessing, which kind of data, which kind of API they're accessing, and lately enforcing that into the most granular level they can actually enforce. And that's what drives the concept of identity security posture management, and that's exactly where we are sitting in. Does that make sense now, Ed?
It absolutely does. I mean, you and I both know that in this area, the ability to discover and have insight into visibility into the appropriate infrastructure, systems, and data is really essential. I would imagine, I'm wondering if visibility isn't one of the topics that comes up a lot, maybe in interactions with customers.
Right. Usually when we're starting the interaction with potential customer or with the existing ones, I think the most important piece is the ability to see, to visualize. We called our model in that area identity insights, because that's exactly what we provide. So that means that we can tap into your identity ecosystem. It can be in your SaaS provider, it could be in your on-prem environment, and almost immediately, right, you can start seeing all the activity, where those identity are coming from, where they are going to, which application they're interacting, what they're doing inside the application, and obviously highlighting all the risk associated with those identity, with the activity they're actually conducting, and obviously be able to alert you and give you some insight with our AI tools regarding what you need to do, which action you need to take, and obviously eventually starting enforcing those decisions.
I'd like to maybe come back in a minute to the security posture management you're doing, but I want to go back now. I know but if I go back 25, 30 years, I remember us all talking about RBAC, role-based. And then that sort of progressed to something a little better, which was ABAC, attribute-based. Then I saw you guys and others start to really tout this concept of PBAC or policy-based. Help me understand. I think I've come to appreciate it, but there might be some people listening who wouldn't sort of get that progression and see how powerful PBAC is today.
Right. So it's as you just mentioned, is like a natural progression of the market and the access control capability. So back then there was the access list. Then we moved to role-based access control. So we are creating role and associate that with the users, creating some groups, entitlement, and associate that all together. Very technical in nature, by the way. Then we started to use ABAC, attribute-based access control. So we took the identity and used their attribute to get access. And if you really look on the policy-based access control approach, and this is, where we are leading the market, is really taking, I will say both, the best of both. That means that we are taking the role-based access control approach, adding the attribute-based access control approach, but on top of that, adding the logical layer, and that's the policy itself. So the policy can tie the identity, the roles, the attributes, and the environmental condition all together, put something that in plain English we can understand, we can, influence as well, and later on potentially certify. So altogether, that's really bring us to the policy-based access control approach. And the policy itself should be more business oriented in a business language, because eventually a branch manager or a VP or an executive, he want to understand what is certified, and is usually certified logic, and the logic is the business acronym of what we are trying to achieve.
Let's go through a nice use case. You mentioned branch managers. I used to be on the board of a large bank, so we always had problems with the complexity, the business complexity of branch managers figuring out who can do what. There'd be phone calls all over the place and waiting for authorizations and just a mess. You guys solve a lot of that. Take us through maybe a classic use case for in a bank or something where someone would be using your product.
Yeah, definitely. Let's say we have a small bank, 300 branches, right? In every single branch, we have a branch manager and a teller and some other, obviously, position. So in the current solution in the market, in the RBAC model, we will probably build a role for every single branch, that for branch 1, from branch 5, and for branch 300. So eventually we will have 300 roles, single role for each branch, and eventually we will connect those identity to the role of the branch, and then grant them the relevant access. With a PBAC approach, we can actually say that people or a manager can access a resource if it's connected to his branches. What that means, that the policy-based access control technology can look on the user that is trying to access a resource and associate the location of the user, the attribute of the user, the branch number, and decide if he's entitled to see this digital resource or not. So you can actually very easily convert 300 roles to one policy. So that's the beauty with a policy-based access control approach. But even take it another step forward. So when we are really speaking about modern architecture, we're speaking about microservices, we're speaking about APIs, we're speaking about data access. So there, everything start to be more transactional, more real-time in nature. And that's where policy-based access control is giving us a powerful process, because it's a runtime engine in real time, can digest all the environmental condition I just mentioned and decide in real time if the user can get the access, can see the data, can invoke an API, or even can click a button. So that's the concept behind the policy-based access control.
And Oren, your product would be doing the actual enforcement, correct? It's not just
yeah,
sort of.
yeah.
How does that work? How do you climb into kind of the environment there? Is there an integration that's required to the different applications being used, like APIs, microservices, or things like that?
Yeah, when we're looking on our, I will say, our platform, there are pretty much 3 to 4 ways you can actually interact. So the best option and the easy option is to tap in your existing identity provider. PlainID can tap in almost immediately to whatever you're using, almost any popular or known vendor. We can tap into your identity provider. We can see all the identity data, and then almost immediately on the other side, tap into your SaaS provider. It can be whatever, when you store your data, like Power BI or Snowflake or Databricks or some others. It can be your Zscaler environment in the cloud when you're starting managing your policy of how people connect to your data or infrastructure inside the organization. or it can be some other platform like, API gateway in the cloud, like AWS or Google and so on. So we have out of the box connectors and API integration, actually more than 30 out of the box that you can just plug and play, pick and choose, and almost immediately gain the access and start enforcing in those environments. Additionally to that, we are getting a lot of use cases regarding homegrown development. Every modern enterprise, they are creating tons of code on a daily basis, and in this code, in this new software services, in new launching new APIs, you need again to secure the access. And again, we are getting in there. We have an SDK, an API that can be easily consumed and eventually easy enforce as well on those kinds of services. And the third piece is actually our native integration with tools like Kubernetes and some others. So we can actually be, I would call it like in a shadow. We can just sit in your Kubernetes environments, in your Google Kubernetes environment and some others, and we can see the traffic, and you can start actually creating policies to enforce anything on that traffic. So no code, whatever policy granularity you want to achieve, and you can enforce that in real time. So those are the three most popular,
Those are really powerful. I mean, those are both. I think the value I see is it's not just for threat, but it's also for compliance. Like I'm wondering, when you map back to compliance requirements, keep thinking in my mind, when I first started thinking about access management, it was rarely about data, but now I bet it's all about data. Is really the data access and kind of data governance, is that where you're mapping back in terms of functional requirements and probably also compliance?
Yeah, definitely. Ed, you actually touched the right point. So you really think about security, identity, data, APIs, all those things we're just throwing in. So eventually what we're trying to secure is the identity getting access to the data. That's eventually. An application is just a presentation layer and a way to consume the data. And the identity is the consumer side, right? In that nature. So PlainID actually sits in that middle. We are actually connecting to your identity provider. We can see any identity activity, and then we can actually authorize what this identity can do on your data platform, on your application level, again, API level, and even microservices and so on. So sitting in between, giving you the first piece of discovery and identity insight, seeing what those identity are doing, understanding where they're going, then giving you the tools to start managing those policies, setting those policies about who can access what, and later on giving you the ability to authorize them with our enforcement capability. So that's the journey of the identity inside the organization, and that's the journey of the identity inside the PlainID platform, the identity security posture management platform.
Let's talk a little bit more about the posture management. What does that look like? Would I get that on a dashboard, or what's the typical experience? And what would a POC look like for someone who decides they want to do that? How would they engage, and what would they begin to see?
Great question. So we're starting very easily, and very fast. We want to bring the value, and the time to value here is crucial, right? Yeah. So tapping in again to your existing identity provider, it can be, the Microsoft of the world, Okta of the world, Ping, whatever you have as a customer or as an enterprise, right? 15 minutes later, you will have the full visibility of your identity and what they're doing. 15 minutes, you will have that immediately. You will see which application, which risk associated with those identity, where they're going and what they're doing. So now we know where are the gaps and where are the risks. Because once we can see it centrally, usually you can define and see all the gaps and all the challenges you have from security perspective. So the next piece is really decide where we are going to tackle first, which services we are going to start putting those policies in place, tuning them and enforcing them. So usually where we start it's with your cloud services and cloud infrastructure. So the first, suspicious usually it's the data provider, where you're actually storing your data. So I mentioned previously Microsoft Power BI, Snowflake, Databricks, Google BigQuery. Usually we're starting there, like almost immediately, connecting the identity to the right policy and enforcing the access to the data, because this is the most sensitive, I would say the jewelry of the organizations. Later on, you can start expanding that. You can start adding more area that you want to cover with the central policy management. And the beauty with PlainID is that you can actually manage that in one centralized and one, I would say, standardized way. You don't need to be an expert in Power BI, in Zscaler, in Databricks, in Snowflake. There is a very easy to use, drag and drop business policy you can create, and we know how to translate that into those different vendors and apply and enforce later on those access. Does that make sense, Ed?
It absolutely does. I mean, I hope people watching give you guys a call. I would imagine the website is the right place for them to get access for a proof of value, proof of concept if they wanted to try something.
Yeah, definitely. And the website actually built in a way that it describes what I just said. The identity discovery, later on, the ability to manage your SaaS environments, and obviously later on to enforce the access by our authorization platform. So you can take a look. There are like tons of example, customer story, videos. Take a look, take a tour on that, and reach out if that makes sense.
Well, I want to close by asking you for some predictions here. You've been at this for a while. You're one of our experts in our community. What do you see for we're filming this in the beginning of 2024? So the bad part about making predictions is that these videos stick around, so somebody may be watching this 2 years from now, so we'll hold you to it. But what do you see coming in the next bunch of the next few months and maybe even the next couple of years?
So I think few things. The first one, obviously, with the current climate, with all the national threat and national security threat, I will say, I think there will be a lot of focus in the next 12 months around how we can secure our infrastructure, how we are securing our data, how people get connected to our services. And obviously, there will be a lot of activity that is more on that national level. The second piece, I think we will start, and actually already started to see some conversion that will expedite between the identity player and the traditional data security players. Because eventually, as we said earlier, we need to combine the process. We need to connect those two together. And I think there's a lot of interest from both sides, and both sides are trying to do a little bit of the other. So, I believe in the next couple of years, we will see some movement on that angle. So those are probably the two main things I can actually potentially commit, but let's see in a couple of years.
You think there'll be some convergence amongst some of these companies? I don't want to use the word, I think convergence is the right word. That's a positive thing. That's
right.
1 + 3, right? When that happens.
Yeah, they're coming together. Eventually, when we're sitting and looking on the customer side, the CISO, the VP of security, they want a clear path between the identity and the data. They want to understand it, they secure it, and control it. And I think the market will do a step forward to bringing that capability.
Well, thank you for what you do. Congratulations on the security posture management for identity. I love that idea. I think it's exactly what's necessary. And let's come back in a few months and see how things are going. But keep up the good work and stay safe where you are as well. Family and friends, stay safe, please.
Awesome. Thank you, Ed. As always, pleasure speaking with you and just waiting for the next time.
You bet. Great to see you. And for everyone else watching, we'll see you next time.